When I say the word caveman, what image pops into your head? Do you envision a hairy ape-like man with a club? Maybe you thought of the Flintstones characters from the 1960s cartoon. Most people probably imagine one or the other, and I feel as though they never really question if humans like this really existed. If you're one of them, I hate to break it to you, but these are some pretty seriously flawed conceptions about cavemen. The truth is, they did exist, but in ways that are far more nuanced and impressive than we often consider. So I wanted to make this video to cut through the myths and show what the real archaeology reveals. The evidence shows how the truth is far stranger and more human than any cartoon. By the end, you'll see the intricate diversity amongst cavemen, and you'll never think of them the same way again. Where did the term come from anyway? It first appeared in English in the 1860s and was simply used to describe prehistoric people whose remains or artifacts were discovered in caves. Around that time, amateur investigators started finding these remains across Europe, sometimes alongside extinct animals. It was a sign of their antiquity. For example, the very first Neanderthal fossil ever discovered was found in 1829 in the Schmerling Caves of Belgium. It was a skull belonging to a 5 or 6-year-old and was found near extinct species of European hyenas and rhinos. However, it was not yet recognized as a different species at the time of discovery, so they misclassified it as an anatomically modern human. A major turning point came in 1856, when quarry workers in the Neander Valley of Germany unearthed the Feldhofer specimen, also known as Neanderthal 1. This find was quickly identified as something different from modern humans, and it kicked off an intense debate about our ancient relatives. In 1886, 2 nearly complete Neanderthal adults were excavated from another Belgian site, Spy Cave, adding crucial evidence for a distinct Neanderthal population in Europe. Discoveries continued through the 1900s, including the now famous Old Man of La Chapelle in France. Anthropologist Marcellin Boule took to reconstructing the Old Man discovery with an illustration that portrayed Neanderthals as stooped and brutish. This image was highly influential to our public understanding of these ancient people. At the time, it was scientifically accurate, but we now have a much better understanding of who these people were, which we'll discuss shortly. Nonetheless, this portrayal leaked into museums and popular culture and helped cement the cartoonish caveman stereotype. Images of hairy wild men appeared in paleo art. Writers and filmmakers borrowed from those old images. Arthur Conan Doyle put ape men into his sci-fi novel The Lost World. Rudyard Kipling wrote about cave people stories. Early films by D.W. Griffith and others showed silent, stone-wielding figures, essentially creating a whole caveman genre. The Captain Caveman cartoon was an example that leaned even harder into the hairy, club-carrying stereotype. Some heroes in these films even fought dinosaurs, which couldn't be less accurate. That last point helped spread a major myth. Movies continued to mix humans and non-avian dinosaurs. It's wrong, but it became a popular cliche. Filmmakers and cartoonists sometimes used the error for laughs. Even comic strips like Alley-Oop in BC presented the same misinformation. Animated shows like The Flintstones typified this motif, going as far as treating dinosaurs as household tools. And aside from these media representations, various other misconceptions have circulated as well. For example, people often think of cavemen as a single species. In reality, a bunch of different human species spent time in caves, including us at many points. Neither was there a single caveman period. They're usually associated with the Stone Age, but that includes millions of years of different people and cultures using caves for various reasons. For those who did choose to spend time in caves, it was rarely their permanent home. They were occupied for reasons ranging from a single night of sleep to burying deceased loved ones. Lastly, and most importantly, these people were not stupid. Many had brains almost the size of ours, even bigger in some cases. Chances are they were extremely intelligent and had intricate cultures. But over time, these stories and images hardened into the simple caveman we think of today. The idea blends folklore, early science, fiction, and entertainment. It's also catchy and kind of lets us romanticize our modern world. but it compresses too many different people, time periods, and behaviors into one inaccurate picture. So let's explore the actual scientific evidence to see what cavemen were really like. The archaeological reality tells a very different story. First of all, we have to recognize that the record is biased. Caves preserve archaeological sites far better than open areas. This is largely because they shield deposits from wind, rain, and sunlight. Their stable temperatures and humidity slow the decay of bones, charcoal, and organic artifacts. Sediments build up in protected pockets, burying tools and hearths where they stay relatively undisturbed. Caves can also limit scavengers, so fragile evidence survives that would vanish outdoors. Of course, there are many different types, such as long lava tubes or shallow rock shelters, but they're all composed of some enclosure. For these reasons, caves leave a clearer, longer-lasting record, which is why they're overrepresented in what we find. In reality, more people have historically lived outside of caves than in them. What they've left behind is just harder to find. But out of all that we have found, the earliest evidence of humans spending time in caves comes from Homo erectus. Emerging around 2 million years ago, this appears to be the first human species that was fully committed to walking on the ground, on 2 feet. Having left the trees, caves would have now been accessible, and they had some big payoffs. They provided shelter from wind, rain, and the cold. Since humans probably started losing their body hair around this time, that protection helped save energy that would otherwise go to staying warm. Caves also offered protection from predators and served as handy places to store food and raw materials. These survival advantages would continue for all human species going forward. A couple sites in particular can give us some great insights into these early cavemen. Wonderwork Cave in South Africa is one of the most important sites in human history. It holds typical evidence of Homo erectus, like Oldowan and Acheulean stone tools. But deep inside, archaeologists found ash and burned bone, dating to around 1 million years ago. According to those who've reported on this, these traces represent the oldest evidence of fire making. Others have argued that the ash and charcoal could be the remnants of natural fires, but the pattern of burned bone, heated sediment, and fractured stone artifacts challenges this. It's also possible that the fire began naturally, but was fed and used by Homo erectus once it got going. More research is needed to solidify the discovery. If true though, the find pushes back controlled fire use way earlier than once thought. At Wonderwork Cave, we may be looking at the first sparks of a technology that would change everything. Many miles away, in China, we come to another Homo erectus site. It consists of a classic cave system near Beijing called Zhoukoudian. What makes Zhoukoudian uniquely important to human evolution is its distance from Africa and its repeated use over time. Having evidence of humans here almost 800,000 years ago, it shows how far Homo erectus was migrating out of Africa. It's produced dozens of fossils from men, women, and children, plus tens of thousands of stone tools and a rich faunal record. These deposits span hundreds of thousands of years, and they include some more clear evidence of fire use than wonderwork. This repeated occupation suggests it was a migratory hub for some of the earliest explorers venturing into the Far East, as if it was the Ellis Island of the Stone Age. So, Homo erectus was the first human species that showed some caveman tendencies. For them, caves acted mostly as shelter for survival, but they also hold evidence of fire use and long migrations, showing how our lineage was already innovative and seeking adventure in these early times. Later species continued to use caves, and as time goes on, we see new behaviors and practices taking place inside them. Let's take a look at Neanderthals as an example. Neanderthals lived across Europe and Western Asia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. They had stocky, muscular bodies built for the cold. This was maybe their most stereotypically caveman feature. Aside from that, they were very human. They had huge brains, capable of advanced cognition. They controlled fire, made sophisticated stone tools, and were expert hunters. Some evidence even points to them caring for injured group members. These are some pretty advanced behaviors, but did you know that Neanderthals also built structures within their caves? Well, this is at least true for the Bruniquel site in France. This cave is full of spiky stalactites and stalagmites. Stalactites hang from cave ceilings, while stalagmites grow upward from the floor. They form when water passes through the limestone and collects calcite minerals. When that water hits cave air, the calcite is then redeposited. Drop by drop, stalactites grow downward. As the drops accumulate on the floor, stalagmites rise up. These are what the Brunicle Neanderthals used to build 2 ring-like structures in 4 smaller stalagmite piles. The structures sit about 336 meters into the cave and date to over 175,000 years ago. These ancient humans broke and stacked about 400 different pieces to build them. The larger ring is about 6.5 meters by 4.5 meters. The smaller one is about 2.2 by 2.1. The total stone material moved weighs an astonishing 2.2 tons. Fire stains were observed on many of the pieces, indicating they had campfires going on here, which makes sense considering that they would have needed light to navigate these depths. Before this study, we really didn't know if Neanderthals created anything resembling a structure, let alone building them underground. The overall construction may seem simple by our modern standards, but it implies a high degree of planning, lighting, and social organization, though their actual function remains a mystery. What do you guys think these annular rings were intended for? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. What I want to shift our focus to now is how Neanderthals used caves as cemeteries. They buried their dead in places like Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iraq. This place is like an archaeological gold mine. Excavations here turned up several Neanderthal skeletons from roughly 50,000 years ago. Many were buried in pits and placed in flexed positions, which is often a sign of deliberate burial. One skeleton, known as Shanidar 1, survived severe injuries, showing that others probably cared for him. Pollen from Shanidar 4 sparked the famous flower burial idea, hinting at a prehistoric ritual, though that claim is debated. Even so, Shanidar strongly suggests that Neanderthals buried their dead and practiced social care. I bet you never considered cavemen to be symbolic, spiritual, or religious, did you? We'll be returning to Neanderthals later in this video to dive deeper into a new theory on how they may have used caves. But first, let's explore some more of our human cousins. While Neanderthals were most dominant in Europe, an archaic human species called Denisovans were living in Asia. They lived between pretty much the same time range as Neanderthals. We discovered them pretty recently though. A juvenile fingerbone from Denisova Cave in Siberia was identified in 2010 as a distinct human species. Researchers were able to make this determination by extracting its DNA. Subsequent genetic studies have shown that Denisovans, Neanderthals, and Homo Sapiens all interbred. Looks like 1967 wasn't the only summer of love. Beyond the fossil and genetic insights, Denisova Cave also produced an array of their cultural artifacts. The usual stone tools were present, but more interesting was the ornamentation. Archaeologists found symbolic objects, including beads made from eggshells and mollusks, ivory pendants, a stone bracelet, and a marble ring. The bracelet is what really stands out to me. It was made out of dark green chloridolite and was most likely worn on special occasions by an elite woman or child. Whoever crafted it used advanced techniques like drilling, grinding, and probably polishing it with leather. Wear marks around the drilled hole shows it held a leather strap and sat on the right wrist. In sunlight, it flashes. By firelight, it glows deep green. Not only is it the oldest bracelet ever found, but it's a true piece of art. So while Denisovans occupied this cave, they were by no means an unintelligent, brutish species. They were fine craftsmen. Before moving on to the next example, I quickly want to guide you to my free newsletter in the description. You can subscribe using your email at no cost, and with it, you'll get updates on the channel, insights into the most up-to-date discoveries in the world of archaeology and human evolution, and even music recommendations by yours truly. So go check it out if that sounds like something for you. Now let's jump back in. Next up is the most controversial cave in all of archaeology, Rising Star Cave. It's located in South Africa, to the northwest of Wonderwork Cave. Unlike Wonderwork, Rising Star is associated with Homo Naledi. In fact, it consists of the only Homo Naledi remains discovered thus far. This species was discovered even more recently than Denisovans. In 2013, the Naledi chamber of Rising Star Cave was explored. Over 1,500 bones from at least 15 individuals were uncovered. The skeletons show a strange mix. Their skulls are small and their pelvis and shoulders look primitive. However, their hands, feet, and teeth look more modern. They were also pretty short, averaging about 5 feet tall. Basically, they wouldn't have blended into a crowd of Homo sapiens too well. The remains were dated to between 335,000 and 235,000 years ago, and this timing has prompted immense disagreement in the archaeological community. In 2015, the Rising Star team reported that these ancient bones were deliberately placed, they were buried. Lee Berger's Netflix documentary, Cave of Bones, further cemented this idea into the minds of the general public. This would predate Neanderthal burials like Shanidar by about 200,000 years, making it the oldest burial site in the world. That claim sparked intense debate. Critics said natural processes like water movement, carnivores, or accidental falls into the chamber could also explain the deposits. They pointed to gaps in the sediment and taphonomic evidence for ritual burial. More recently, the Rising Star team again published new papers arguing for intentional burial. This time, they provided further evidence of the bodies being covered with soil rapidly, before the soft tissue even decomposed. These additional studies have persuaded some researchers, but many still caution that quote-unquote burial implies ritual intent, and that the claim isn't settled yet. The debate over this cave system is alive and well, and it really forces us to reconsider the simplicity of ancient humans once again. Do you think Homo Naledi buried their dead? Let me know in the comments. Even smaller than Homo Naledi was Homo Floresiensis. This species stunned the world in 2003 with its miniature anatomy. They lived on the island of Flores in Indonesia. The main fossils come from Liang Bua Cave. This site yielded one almost complete skeleton, labeled LB1, and additional bones. Those remains sat alongside stone tools and island fauna, including small elephants that appear to be butchered. Looking at LB1, we can see that it stood only about 3 feet tall. Its brain was small, but it walked upright, and this mix of traits fuels debates about the species' origin and evolution. The site's stone tools are sophisticated, which also complicates things. It shows that they had tool-making cognition, but without the brain size typically associated with that type of behavior. In other words, you don't need a big brain to have big ideas. We don't have a precise time frame for when Floresiensis was living here. Some estimates suggest they arrived over 1 million years ago and lasted until 50,000 years ago. Others think they went extinct as recently as 12,000 years ago, which has led to folklore of modern humans coming into contact with them, which would be an insane thing to experience. Far more research is needed to better understand this mysterious species, and other caves around the island will likely be targeted for those investigations. The last species we'll mention should be very familiar to all of you. It's Homo Sapiens. Yes, throughout our 300,000-year history, we used caves extensively. Along with the emergence of Homo sapiens came an eruption of symbolic thought and cognition, and the caves that sheltered our ancestors can give us a glimpse into their minds. Blombos Cave, on Africa's southern coast, is physically tiny but archaeologically rich. The cave floor is only about 40 square meters, but excavations recovered some magnificent artifacts. Among them are engraved ochre pieces, shell beads, complex tools, and an ochre workshop, dated to between 100,000 and 75,000 years ago. The engraved piece of ochre shows deliberate abstract markings. They're kind of geometrical with their linear etching. The shell beads were pierced and most likely worn as personal adornments. Archaeologists found 2 ochre processing toolkits here as well. They consist of shells where the material was ground up into a powder for pigments, further indicating that the site was a ritual center. I can only wish to have been a fly on that cave wall during whatever ritual took place. I picture the performance eliciting a strange combination of emotions, as if it was beautiful, scary, and mysterious all at the same time. Blombos also preserves complex technology. Finely crafted bifacial points show evidence for heat treatment and pressure flaking, both of which are signs of advanced toolmaking. These points foreshadow the even more impressive stone tools Homo sapiens would eventually develop. For these people, modern behaviors were well established, arising before we left Africa. That said, it wasn't long before Homo sapiens migrated across the planet. We would carry our affinity to caves as we traversed Europe, and eventually Australia and the Americas. In some cases, our symbolic thoughts would shine through. In others, we find the impressive foraging and engineering skills of indigenous groups. For example, Jaramalai Cave in East Timor and its nearby rock shelters were base camps for some of the world's first seafarers. Perched on the rugged coast, these sites offered shelter, vantage points, and access to the sea. Around 42,000 years ago, people here were already hauling tuna and mackerel, fish that live far beyond the shore. These deep water catches prove these cavemen took seacraft into open seas. By 20,000 years ago, they crafted polished shell hooks from trochus, making them the oldest known fishing gear. And fishing wasn't just a side hobby. For them, survival meant mastering the tides, winds, and swells in search of seafood. Their foraging practices suggest that they used small boats for expeditions that demanded teamwork. Their cultural knowledge would have been oriented around the sea. These caves were launch pads for a maritime way of life, proving that early Homo sapiens in Southeast Asia were explorers, innovators, and masters of the ocean. I've talked about Lascaux Cave a few times on this channel, and would eventually like to make an entire video dedicated to it because it's just so intriguing. But it plays an important role in this story. It's located in France, and it's probably the most iconic cave site in the world. Prehistoric people painted these stunning pieces of art between 22,000 and 17,000 years ago. Its galleries hold nearly 2,000 paintings and engravings. 900 animals fill the walls, including aurochs, stags, horses, and more. There are also some strange abstract signs. A man with a bird head facing a bison always sends chills down my spine. Who knows what it could possibly mean? The Hall of Bulls houses the Great Black Bull, which is the largest prehistoric image we know of. To sum it up in a single phrase, Lascaux's been called the Sistine Chapel of prehistory. Today, most scholars interpret the cave as a sacred or initiation space, but like so many of the other sites in this video, we may never grasp the full meaning behind these cave paintings. On the other hand, if we travel to the southwestern United States, we find a site that's a little more explicit in its purpose. Here in Colorado, we come to Mesa Verde. It's both a national park and a UNESCO heritage site. Cliffs and caves abound, and the landscape preserves nearly 900 years of Puebloan history, from about 450 AD to the year 1300. Archaeologists have recorded more than 4,400 sites across the park. Some of the most eye-catching scenes are the 600 or so cliff dwellings built into canyon alcoves. These range from small storage rooms to multi-story complexes like Cliff Palace, Balcony House, and Square Tower House. Each structure fits uniquely into its surroundings, which resulted in compact communities. Builders used sandstone blocks and adobe mortar to construct their homes. Buildings typically had U, E, or L-shaped plans, and their south-facing windows captured winter sun. Ceremonial areas known as kivas can be found around these sites. So too can towers, which may have served as lookouts for the kivas. Each of these features shows the advanced engineering, social organization, and ritual life of indigenous Americans. So these cliffside caves were their homes, but they didn't just live in them. They totally modified them to fit their unique culture. So if you're still hesitant to accept how advanced other human species were, good luck denying the sophistication of Homo sapiens. In a very real sense, we too are cavemen. Early in the video, I said I wanted to revisit Neanderthals, and this is for good reason. After surveying all these different species, we can be confident that there is no single definition of a caveman. Caves were used by various species for many different reasons, and an exciting new theory for Neanderthals has been circulating, which is that they used caves to hibernate. So first of all, what is hibernation? Put simply, it's a survival strategy. Animals use it to brace cold times and food scarcity. Their metabolism, body temperature, heart rate, and breathing all drop to low levels. Stored fat supplies energy for weeks or months. There is a wide spectrum of hibernation strategies, from daily torpor to longer seasonal hibernation. It's a rare trait to observe in primates because our big brains and high metabolism need constant fuel. However, the fat-tailed dwarf lemur is an exception. Despite it being rare, this one example shows that under the right conditions and circumstances, primates can evolve hibernation-like strategies. So, could extinct relatives of ours have done the same under the right pressures? After all, Neanderthals famously adapted to the vicious ice ages of prehistoric Eurasia. Their world swung between cold glacial periods and warmer interglacial periods. Temperatures jumped and plunged. In cold phases, Europe ran 5 to 10 degrees Celsius cooler on average. Summers were short and mild, with grasslands and open woods rich in herbivores. This was the time to capitalize on wild game, before the following winter fell well below freezing. These shifts changed prey and foraging ranges. For example, Neanderthal summer tactics likely matched ours, mixing hunting and gathering. The big question is about what they did in the winter. A few anthropologists argue those harsher winters forced a very different seasonal behavior. Researchers have been studying Neanderthal bones from Cima de los Huesos in Spain. This cave is one of Europe's biggest archaeological troves. The bones date to nearly 500,000 years ago. These cavemen lived at a time of extreme glacial chill. The team studying them used microscopes, CT scans, and detailed photography to try and uncover how they endured such conditions, and they found some strange lesions, tunnels through spongy bone, patches of new growth, and a rotten fence post texture. Importantly, young individuals showed many of these signs. The lesions resemble bone disorders like rickets or parathyroid disease, but they also echo marks seen in modern hibernating animals. The patterns of fresh damage, followed by healing, suggest cycles of deep rest with brief arousals. Even puberty seems to pause and restart in some skeletons. This hints at interrupted development during adolescence. From these finds, the researchers propose their bold idea. Neanderthals may have entered a hibernation-like state in deep caves to survive harsh winters. As a comparison, hibernating cave bears from the same Cima de los Huesos system show similar bone changes, and it raises the possibility of a shared seasonal stress. Could we even go as far as to suggest Neanderthals watched bears and copied parts of their strategy? Living in the same areas, intelligent Neanderthals would have noticed the bear vanishing as winter bites. Months later, it wakes up, thin and alive. It ate nothing, hardly moved, yet survived. Could they have learned from the bear strategy? Could slowing the body and resting have been more deliberate than instinctual? Over generations, they may have copied the bear's rhythm. They retreated deep, fasted long, and conserved every calorie. It's an exciting idea, but problems remain. First, the bone lesions can have other causes. Illness, infection, or long-term nutritional stress can produce similar marks. For example, teeth often show enamel hypoplasia from childhood stress, typically associated with poor nutrition. The lesions here could reflect a similar situation. More research is needed to separate causes. Second, the Neanderthal sample is small and patchy across time and space. This makes species-wide claims about their hibernation risky, but the biggest barrier is their biology. Neanderthals had large brains that demanded a steady flow of energy and heat. True hibernation slashes metabolism and neural activity. Small hibernators like squirrels can tolerate that. Big brains cannot. Bears survive because of their huge fat stores, but Neanderthals probably lacked that reserve. So given these limitations, sustained hibernation seems unlikely for now. But it's still being studied, and the evidence opens a new window into the cave life of Neanderthals. It appears as if the more we investigate these ancient cave systems, the more we debunk any myths about prehistoric cavemen. Whether we're looking at Homo Erectus, Naledi, or Sapiens, these people were unique and complex. So where does the future lie for cave archaeology? How much more can we find? Well, a new field is breaking ground as we speak, no pun intended, and it will play a huge role going forward. It's called Sedimentary Ancient DNA, or sedaDNA. sedaDNA is the study of genes trapped in dirt, not bones. Tiny fragments of people, animals, plants, and microbes survive in cave sediments. Basically anything that lived there, whether from things like defecation when they are alive, or the decay of soft tissue after they die, these traces precipitate through the soil. And similar to how they preserve bone and artifacts, the stable temperatures and low light of caves slow the decay of genetics. That makes them prime targets for studies like this. They can tell us who was occupying a cave, when, and sometimes even what they ate without actually collecting physical remains. It's already been used at a few sites, including Denisova Cave. Only a few bones have been recovered here, making it the perfect place to apply sedaDNA. By taking soil samples, researchers were able to detect a previously unknown gap in the record. The results showed repeated Denisovan use over time, except for one interval between 120,000 and 90,000 years ago. Instead, they only found traces of Neanderthal DNA at this time. It shows how the cave was used by different human species at different times. Homo sapiens would even spend time here thousands of years later. Since fossils are so rare in this cave, we can't use them to make claims like this. The sample size is simply too small. but with dozens of sediment samples from multiple chambers, we can be more confident in this gap. The researchers also found DNA from other animals, and this faunal DNA tracks climate shifts. Over time, we can see a shift from cave bears giving way to brown bears. Hyena types change too. A cold snap is likely what led to this turnover in species. So, similar to our hominin relatives, the animals living here clearly had their own struggles. It's also a reminder that cavemen lived alongside some pretty scary creatures, though dinosaurs weren't one of them. Another novel genetic technique has also been used at Denisova Cave. This time, researchers developed a non-destructive method to release DNA trapped in artifacts. Applied to this deer tooth pendant excavated from the cave, the method recovered both human and deer genomes. Dating places the pendant between 25,000 and 19,000 years ago. The human data shows the DNA came from a female. Whether she was the maker or just the wearer, we don't know. But her genome matches ancient North Eurasian groups, like the Malta from Siberia. Such a discovery brings up something we haven't yet discussed and is often overlooked: cave women. They existed too, and so did cave children and cave grandchildren. All of these individuals probably had unique roles within their families and cultures. They probably fought, laughed, and loved. Discoveries like this shift us from looking at species-level stories to more intimate ones. We stop seeing faceless populations and begin to know individuals from deep time. This pendant has turned into a direct line into this cave woman's legacy. We're one step closer to knowing who she was, what she was actually like, and in many ways, she was probably just like us. Thanks for staying until the end. You truly love our human story. Don't forget to check out my free newsletter in the description, and if you've made it this far into the video, it's right up your alley. And if you want to learn more about our deep evolutionary history, watch this video. I'll see you in the next one.